It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story.
On this vote, the ayes are 311 and the nays are 112. The bill is passed.
A lifeline for Ukraine as the US House of Representatives votes for a $61 billion aid package. President Zelensky says, "Thank you, America," as Ukraine conducts a large-scale drone attack on an energy facility in Russia.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
Calls for the Met chief to resign after the police apologise for threatening to arrest a Jewish man near pro-Palestinian protesters.
We've waited 6 months for the Met to take control of these crowds, take control of the streets. I think the time has come now for Mark Rowley to go.
Israel hits Gaza with airstrikes. Hospital authorities say 9 people, including 6 children, have been killed near Rafah. The female gamers battling for a big money prize in the UK's first professional esports tournament of its kind. Manchester City beat Chelsea to reach the FA Cup final for the 2nd year in a row. And we'll be taking a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in the press preview from past. Evening all. The US House of Representatives has this evening approved what could amount to nearly $100 billion in aid for Ukraine and other US allies. It brings to an end months of political wrangling, with frustrations felt most keenly in Kyiv as the war with Russia drags on. Well, tonight, President Zelensky has spoken of his gratitude, saying the passing of the bill will save thousands of lives. Here's our US correspondent, Mark Stone.
It took 484 days to get here, but in the end, it took just minutes.
On this vote, the ayes are 311 and the nays are 112. The bill is passed.
A clear majority voting for a bill to resume sending weapons to Ukraine. Outside, the celebration of a few, reflecting the mood of many more back at home.
How are you feeling? Is this a good moment?
Yeah, God bless America.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, I say. You are supporting the Ukrainian, you are supporting peace in the world.
There is no questioning the impact this long American impasse has had on the war in Ukraine. For months now, Russia has had the upper hand. Russian airstrikes deep within land held by Ukraine. The front line has inched westward. Putin's soldiers digging in, the Ukrainians running out of weapons and ammunition. Sky News has seen the impact, the frustration firsthand. And so with this backdrop, words of gratitude from the Ukrainian president.
The US House of Representatives voted today. I thank everyone who supported our package. This is a life-saving decision.
Essentially, then, there are several distinct stories here. Yes, fundamentally, this is about Ukraine. It is about America enabling Ukraine to push back the Russian advance. But it is also about the mess that is American politics, about American priorities, whether they be global or local.
It has been a small wing of the Republican Party who have held all this up with their fiery cheerleader, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
This is the sellout of America today. When we had members of Congress in there waving the Ukrainian flag on the United States House of Representatives floor, while we're doing nothing to secure our border, I think every American in this country should be furious. Who's going to vote for these people? How can you vote for these people? They don't serve our country.
Why is this fight against Russia not worth it? Ma'am, why is the fight against Russia not worth it?
Are you waiting to see if there'll be more?
To do this when our border is wide open, to do this when Americans are struggling, it's a slap in the face to Americans, and we shouldn't have done it.
It was, curiously, after this meeting last Friday between the Republican Speaker of the House and Donald Trump that a political pivot came. Johnson allowed the vote he'd blocked for so long. We don't know what was said, but the suggestion is that the former president, and maybe the next one, has an evolving view on a war he's long questioned. From here, the bill will now pass through the upper house and then on to President Biden's desk. Weapons will then flow east again to Ukraine.
Well, in a moment, we'll get the reaction from here in the UK from our political correspondent, Nick Martin. But first, our US correspondent, Mark Stone, joining us live from Washington. Mark, just how much of an impact has this American delay actually had?
Bleak and depressing is the way one person who has been watching the front line closely, one diplomatic source put it to me, describing the front line at the moment and the ability of Russia to push westward as these weapons have not come, whether it be heavy weaponry, missiles, surface-to-air missiles to take out Russian drones, which are in fact made in Iran, or Russian missiles, or whether it be literally small arms. The Ukrainians have been running out of the bullets that they put in their guns. It has become very, very desperate for Ukraine, and it's not really been a focus because we've been focused elsewhere on things like the Middle East. But it is a very difficult fight for Ukraine, and this will be a very, very welcome moment indeed. It's why, for example, David Cameron, the British Foreign Secretary, was out here a few weeks ago talking to the people who he believes pull the strings, like Donald Trump down at Mar-a-Lago. It is why the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, released a statement today saying how relieved and how pleased he is that American funding will now come again. And domestically, of course, there are those on the right of politics who wonder what this faraway war has got to do with them. They wonder what victory will look like. I think it is fair to say that victory will not look Ukraine will not look like it did before the invasion at the end of the victory. There will be some sort of settlement, but I think those who believe this fight is worth having, and the majority of American politicians we now know today do believe it's a fight it's worth having, is about Ukraine's ability to push that front line eastward as far as they can before a settlement comes, which may, of course, result in a new border. Perhaps. That's not being talked about openly, but that's probably what a settlement and some sort of ceasefire would look like. But make no question, there is no question, Neil, this is a very important moment. It's a fascinating moment, too, for American politics, as they fought for so long. Breakthrough now, but it comes at a price. The debate over what money goes to America's southern border, another entirely different issue, a massive mess. Well, that debate goes on.
Certainly does. Mark, thanks very much. Well, let's turn our attention to Westminster. Nick Martin standing by. Nick, I suspect that the British government will be very, very pleased that the United States has acted in this fashion, not least our Foreign Secretary, given the fact that they travelled the Atlantic to try and drum up support for it not that long ago.
That's right, Mark's right. Not only is it a big moment in the United States, it's a big moment here back in the United Kingdom. And, you know, a lot of eyes will be on what role David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, played. As Mark alluded to there, just a few weeks ago he paid Donald Trump a visit at Donald Trump's Florida residence and tried really to kind of unlock that deadlock, try to get Donald Trump to sort of persuade those reluctant Republicans to enable this kind of deal to go through. Now, it might be overstating it, but the British would like to think that David Cameron had a pivotal role in that, in kind of a moment of influence, that David Cameron is the man to kind of do these big things on the world stage. And so tonight, David Cameron's tweeted this. He says, US House support for $60 billion funding for Ukraine is a vital step forward, he said. If Putin ever doubted the West's resolve to back Ukraine, this shows our collective will is undimmed. With support, Ukraine can and will win. And remember, the British support for Ukraine has been substantial over the years. More than £7 billion of military aid since Russia annexed Crimea back in 2014. And there has been more reaction tonight. Boris Johnson, of course, a big friend of Volodymyr Zelensky, a big friend of Ukraine, congratulated the US on this decision. And the former Prime Minister Liz Truss said the West must show, in the face of the access of authoritarianism, Russia, Iran and China. So there's no doubt this is a key moment, and the British will also be very happy in David Cameron's role to play in this as well. But also it will have to focus on Britain's role, because this war is protracted, it will continue, and it will need more money as the months and years go on.
Nick, thanks very much. On tomorrow's Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips, you can catch an interview with the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss, remember her? She's been speaking to our economics editor, Ed Conway. Trevor also joined by Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary Claire Coutinho, the Shadow Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, and Reform UK's leader, Richard Tice. That's here on Sky News from 8:30 tomorrow morning. The Home Secretary has written to both the Metropolitan Police and the Mayor of London to express his concerns after an anti-Semitism campaigner was told he was openly Jewish and warned about being a provocation at a pro-Palestinian march. Not only did the Met have to apologise, they then had to apologise for their apology. Gideon Falter has now called for the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, to go. He was joined tonight by the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, as Sky's Paul Kelso reports.
Free, free Palestine!
Pro-Palestinian protests have become routine in London. But when Gideon Falter tried to cross the path of one last weekend, the chief executive of the Campaign for Anti-Semitism says the police demonstrated the very prejudice he campaigns against.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
The Metropolitan Police has now apologised twice, once for what it called a regrettable incident, then again after maintaining Gideon Falter's presence was a provocation. He told Sky News that isn't enough.
I could not understand how the police were able to look at a Jew walking down the street and decide that person is the threat, that person needs to be got rid of. We've waited 6 months for the Met to take control of these crowds, take control of the streets. I think the time has come now for Mark Rowley to go.
The Home Secretary and the Mayor of London say the Met was right to apologise for an incident that amplifies concerns among British Jews that indulgent policing of pro-Palestinian marches has made the capital a hostile environment. In central London, the two sides met across the barriers, the police playing diplomat between irreconcilable views.
I'm not going to get into an argument over it.
Well, we are having an argument by definition because you disagree with what I'm saying.
We're having a conversation.
It doesn't feel very constructive.
I think Jewish people who identify with Israel would feel threatened because of their identification with Israel. They would not feel threatened because they're Jewish.
Do you feel intimidated as a Jewish person?
Absolutely. I would never walk around with a Magen David. You know, my old University College London, they have sit-ins. I mean, the unbelievable hatred.
But you're here today.
I'm here today because I feel safe.
These pro-Palestinian marchers say they're here to protest against the bank they accuse of financing genocide. On the other side of the street, pro-Israeli protesters who say they are apologists for terrorism. And in the middle, trying to keep the peace and navigate this toxic politics, are the police.
It's a really difficult line for the police to tread between facilitating protest, counter-protest, and then people going around their normal business in London who may have an issue with the protest or the counter-protest. So you're literally between a rock and a hard place here. It's exceptionally challenging. Public order is probably the most challenging thing in policing on the street, face-to-face, you can deal with.
The policing minister will meet the Met Commissioner next week. As long as the Gaza conflict continues, it will test the boundaries of British free speech and confidence in those charged with policing it. Paul Kelso, Sky News in central London.
Well, let's stick with the situation in the Middle East. And Iran's foreign minister has downplayed an attack by Israel on the Iranian city of Isfahan. Hossein Amir Abdullahian said that drones, which he compared to toys that children play with, had been shot down and no damage was reported. But it's widely thought that the attack was carried out with missiles targeting an airbase and nuclear site. Meanwhile, Israel continues its operation in Gaza. In the south, Rafah is now home to 1.3 million people, many of them displaced there by the war. And it is there that hospital authorities say an airstrike has killed 9 people, including 6 children. A warning, this report by Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi contains images of the people killed in that strike.
The pain in Gaza is raw. As they mourn over the bodies of their loved ones, they cry out for divine intervention. But for people here, it feels like a place the world has forgotten. Ahmed cradles the lifeless body of his 5-year-old daughter. His wife was also killed in the Israeli airstrike.
I don't want to say anything to the world or to anyone because this is an unjust world. This is a world deprived of all human values and morals. It only understands the language of power.
And this is what's left of the residential building in Rafah after the attack. At least 6 children were killed here, according to survivors.
The first explosion was followed by a second one. People in that house fell into the street with rubble on top of them. We found children and dead bodies under the rubble in the street. A woman and 2 young children were sent flying from the other apartment into this one.
What's happening here is simply horrific. The destruction in many places total. Israel is still indicating a major operation on Rafah is not far away, where it claims the last Hamas stronghold is based. Diplomats have been working to stop this war from spreading, and the direct clash between Israel and Iran appears over for now. Tehran is downplaying that it was even attacked by Israel in the early hours of Friday morning. The implication being that if it didn't really happen, they don't need to respond.
What happened last night was not a strike. They're more like toys that our children play with, not drones. It was not worth telling us before it happened.
On Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest, people have been taking to the beach in Tel Aviv. Under the hot spring sunshine, the clash between Iran and Israel seems a world away. People here are hoping the worst of this phase of the crisis has passed.
I hope everything will be over soon. I mean, it's just unnecessary for both sides to get people hurt.
I definitely hope this direct bit is over, right? We have enough things to worry about internally and with our direct borders, with Lebanon and with Hamas and Gaza. So we don't want to add anything to that.
But there are still significant tensions across the Middle East, and the region remains at boiling point. Last night, explosions were seen at a military base used by Iranian-linked forces in Iraq. The US says reports that they carried out this airstrike are not true, and it's not yet clear who was responsible. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Jerusalem.
It has been one of the most testing weeks for the Scottish National Party since the independence referendum of a decade ago. Their coalition with the Green Party is now in doubt, following a decision to renege on a key net zero target, while the SNP and its leadership continue to reel from the rearrest and charging of former Chief Executive Peter Murrow. Sky's Matthew Thompson has more.
In 2014, Scottish politics was transformed by the independence referendum. 10 years on, the fault lines are still here. But the SNP, Independence's chief messenger, is struggling. The shock of its former chief executive and husband to Nicola Sturgeon being arrested is compounded by a host of political problems. Not least, its partner in government, the Scottish Greens, has announced a vote on whether to stay in coalition after the ditching of a key climate change target. Today, the First Minister was putting on a brave face.
It's clearly a discussion that the Greens will have to have. I'm delighted to be marching alongside this independence rally with the Green colleagues like Ross Greer, MSP, and many other Green colleagues right across the country. And that's what, of course, one of the many issues that unites us is that we want to see independence for our country.
Independence, though, is not the political trump card it once was. Polls show support for an independent Scotland hovers around 50%, but its salience is dropping. One study put independence as the 6th most important issue to Scottish voters, far behind the economy, health and education. At the same time, support for the SNP is falling too. Polls suggest they could lose up to half of their seats at the general election.
By any standards, the SNP is in trouble. Its grip on Scottish politics seems likely to weaken, possibly considerably, at the general election. It would be a mistake to conclude from that, though, that the cause of independence will follow suit. But it is fair to say that the means of achieving independence has seldom seemed less clear.
But perhaps unsurprisingly, the mood on the streets of Glasgow was largely defiant.
This is not SNP, this is independence.
I'm not saying SNP and the Greens have got everything right, but what alternatives are you giving decent, hard-working people in this community? Labour and the Tories, they're not on my radar at all.
There is always going to be a connection between the SNP and independence, and people kind of see them being as one and the same. But ultimately, if you're an independence supporter, you will support independence regardless of what party it is. It's the, seen as the driving force behind it.
The flags may still turn out in force, the passion undimmed. But at least in the short term, Scottish politics looks set to be decided on matters other than the Constitution. The SNP may pay the price for that, even if the cause of independence will march on. Matthew Thompson, Sky News, Glasgow.
A man who set himself on fire outside Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York has died. Police say Max Azzarello pulled out a number of conspiracy theory pamphlets before dousing himself in a flammable liquid. Residents of Tenerife have staged an anti-tourism demonstration to protest against the number of foreign holidaymakers buying property on the island and making it unaffordable for locals. Thousands marched through the island's capital, also highlighting their concerns about illegal short-term lets, which avoid paying taxes into the local economy and ignore sustainability rules. Some roads in Wales will be reverting back to 30 miles an hour following criticism of the Welsh Government's default 20-mile-an-hour policy. The changes come after around 500,000 people signed a petition opposing the policy. Transport Secretary Ken Skates said in many areas routes that shouldn't have been included in the scheme were. Storm Babet ravaged parts of the country last October, leaving hundreds of people displaced and tens of thousands of homes without power. Properties flooded as the extreme rainfall swept in. But now, 6 months on, many communities feel neglected and say not enough has been done to support them. Our North of England correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports.
Storm Babet battered the UK last October. It caused devastating flooding, widespread power cuts, and a number of people lost their lives. 6 months on, and many communities are still picking up the pieces. In Catcliffe near Rotherham, more than 200 homes were evacuated when water levels reached over 6 feet high. On Sheffield Lane, the majority of residents still aren't back in their homes, forced to stay with family or in hotels whilst they wait for their properties to be repaired. Chris Lloyd's home was so badly damaged he won't be in it till June. He says they feel totally forgotten.
They're not helping us. There's nothing being helped or said, but give us something. Reduce the amount of water that potentially could come in. But do something, tell us something. And I say a million times, try and give the people of Catcliffe a future.
And make yourselves as small as you can be. At the local theatre school, the Saturday morning toddler group are oblivious to the stress and strain caused by the storm. It took weeks for the building to dry out, and they relied on the help of dozens of volunteers to clean up the dirt and debris it left behind.
It sounds really sad. Every time there's like heavy rain, I'm sat at home thinking, I hope it's not raining in Catcliffe, because if it's heavy again, it's just awful having to think like that. We knew quite a few of the children on this road, and it was just like heartbreaking to know that it was their home that had been destroyed.
The water may have disappeared, but communities here are still dealing with the aftermath and the impact of that ferocious flooding and living in fear that it could happen again at any time. The government says it's tackling the problem by investing in flood defences and taking action to make the UK more flood resilient.
When local authorities are considering housing applications, that they take into account where those houses are being built and not on floodplains. But from my point of view, I want to be making sure that the government, as we are, putting as much money in possible to flood alleviation measures.
But as communities continue to rebuild their homes and lives, many feel they've been left to fend for themselves in fear they won't be protected when the next storm arrives. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Catcliffe.
They've come a long way from playing for a case of energy drinks. The UK's first ever professional women's gaming tournament is taking place this weekend with a prize pool of £15,000 available. The audience for female esports has been growing exponentially, as Sky's Molly Malone reports.
There's nothing that you can do to stop Rex once she's set in motion.
What you're watching is a UK female first, the first tournament of its kind. 4 teams of professional gamers battling it out for a prize pool worth thousands. Team captain Michaela, her game name Mimi, at the top of her game. She's been doing this for almost a decade.
I really hope to see in the near future that to have women on the best teams, like not only play in a women's team, but also play with the males. I'm pretty sure it's very doable. It just takes time.
This has been insane for GX.
What they're playing, a game called Valorant. Like other esports, it took off in COVID, but it's seen as more inclusive than other games. Women make up many of the main characters, encouraging them to play. The gender gamer gap has been narrowing. Almost half of all gamers in the UK are women, but globally they make up just 5% of professional gamers. The hope is that events like this will soon change that.
After the first map, and we saw them take it to OT there as well.
And change is what's wanted, as women face gender-specific abuse as they play.
A lot of it is like go back to the kitchen, you know, those playing into the very typical kind of old, very stereotypes and gender roles. It's honestly doesn't faze a lot of women. I think you hear it so much that it's almost laughable at this point, that it is funny and comical because, you know, it's the silliest and dumbest thing to say. And I think a lot more women are feeling like they can now speak up and stand up for themselves in those situations.
The champions will be crowned on Sunday, but people here feel that, for now, the emerging prominence of women in gaming is a celebration in itself. Molly Malone, Sky News in East London.
Time for the sport. Leah's standing by.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
This is a glimpse into the future of AFC Bournemouth, a multi-million-pound training ground that is getting closer to transforming the club completely. Owner and American businessman Bill Foley was visiting from his home in Las Vegas, an opportunity to see his vision becoming reality.
It looks spectacular.
But maybe
that's the difference you've got.
Could we have saved a few £1 million?
Maybe. But yeah, it certainly looks incredible, that's for sure.
I mean, women's academy, first team, unbelievable facilities are going to be here. This will be one of the best training facilities in the league. When it's finished, it's going to be unbelievable.
Despite being Bournemouth's owner for less than 18 months, he's been bullish with his predictions about survival and made huge strides off the pitch in an industry that promises fans so much but fails to deliver. So how has he kept his word?
Transparency, be honest, always tell the truth, and really always be honest. And I have big ambitions for this team. And I know we can do it because I've done it. I've done it with the Golden Knights, our hockey club.
So you've translated what you did in Vegas to Bournemouth with the same model, the same infrastructure, the same plans?
Same plan, same program. It's expensive. You've got to put a lot of money behind to keep your word, you've got to put a lot of money behind it. But the goal is, now that we've moved up the table a bit, which I was confident we would do this year, I believe we'll start attracting more talent, better talent. They'll want to stay in Bournemouth. They won't want to move on. That's our job. In a place like this indoor pitch that we built, it's fantastic.
Was that always your plan, to put things in place that enabled the club to grow organically, but challenge those teams eventually at the top of the table?
Absolutely. You know, we want to play in Europe. Do we get to the top 4, top 5? Complicated, difficult for Bournemouth. But with a new stadium and these facilities, we can keep on doing better every year. Just improve a bit. We have a really good team, and the team is motivated in becoming a team as opposed to a group of individuals. If we can keep on doing that as we move on through this season and next season, the season after, we'll be successful.
If someone had said to you all the things that you'd achieve and so on when you invested in Bournemouth, when you bought this great football club, would you have believed that you'd made so much progress in such a short space of time?
Well, I'm running out of time. so I have to make sure I do things quickly and efficiently. I had complete confidence in what we could do. Once I met our management team and some of the football staff, I knew what we could do, and I knew with the right resources behind it and the right attitude, a winning attitude, and a never give up attitude, I knew we'd be okay. I was very confident. Wow, it's gigantic, isn't it?
You're one of a number of Americans that have invested in the Premier League. Is there a reason why you think that there are more American businessmen that are looking at English football as a vehicle to get into the sports industry, to potentially make money, to be a part of something that's a global product? Is there a reason why you think that's the case?
Yeah, well, I mean, football is the greatest sport in the world, and the Premier League is the greatest league in the world. And so if you're going to invest in a league or a team, why not invest in the best? Even if it's not the biggest team in the biggest town and so on. And so for us, we're not a sovereign wealth fund. We're not financial sponsors.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we, of course, will be taking a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the eye columnist, Yasmin Alabai-Brown, and the broadcaster and psychotherapist, Lucy Berefers. What will we be talking about? Well, among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front of The Observer, the United States House of Representatives voting to unblock aid to Ukraine. Stay with us, more on that and the rest of the papers after this.
They found an assemblage of 500 items, medieval, Bronze Age to medieval, which is the biggest assemblage of Bronze Age to medieval finds from the whole of Fife ever, from one area. The coins date to 1466 AD, and they're copper alloy. They're in pristine condition, and the last hoard of its type was found in Crossraguel Abbey in 1919. So it's a really, really rare hoard, a once-in-a-century hoard. It was found in a latrine, obviously, in a toilet. It was obviously been dropped with a monk, and the coins were found in the sediment of the latrine. And obviously, my coins were in far superior condition due to the soil. So it was just amazing. Yeah, what a buzz! It was 52 of the farthings we found, but also in the general area we found 2 John Balliol farthings, the only 2 found in the whole of Scotland. So they're extremely, extremely rare coins. We also found a Malcolm farthing. I think there's only 3 found in the whole of Scotland. So just exceptionally rare coinage on this site. We don't actually know if it's a hybrid site, if it's a settlement stroke market site, but it's clearly very significant. Yeah, the medieval ring was found a wee bit away. It was maybe a field or so, but sometimes you have to wait because of the crops that are in stubble when they get harvested and they're too high and you can't get your metal detector right to the ground. Yeah. So you just go right over the finds, you know. So the conditions have to be perfect. And the carrot harvest, the conditions were perfect. You were getting your metal detector right to the ground, which you actually need for medieval material because it's so thin. So you have to get your detector right to the ground for optimum conditions. You've got a 50-50 chance of getting the permission. It just depends, you know, on your luck at the time. If somebody else is detecting the land, or if the farmer's actually wanting a metal detectorist in the land. So it just depends on your luck.
Welcome back. In just a moment, the press preview, our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. But first, the top stories this hour, and the US House of Representatives has approved what could amount to nearly $100 billion in aid for Ukraine and other US allies. The Metropolitan Police have apologised for threatening to arrest a Jewish man near pro-Palestinian protesters. He has now called on the Met chief to resign. Gazan hospital authorities in Rafah say that 9 people, including 6 children, have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. 25 to 11 means it is time for the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half an hour, we'll be taking a look at what's making the headlines with the columnist, Yasmin Alabai-Brown, and the broadcaster and psychotherapist, Lucy Beresford. With you guys in just a second, but let's take you through the front pages that we have, starting with the Telegraph. It goes with the growing calls for the head of the Met to resign over the way his officers treated a Jewish man during a pro-Palestinian rally. Calls now supported by former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Here is The Observer. It reports that Labour is targeting Tories over the age of 65 at the next election, hoping to capitalise on their fears that their own party might cut pensions. End this bloody disgrace, the lead story in the Sunday Times. They have the backing of 180 senior politicians for their campaign to finally get justice for the victims, well, of the very long-running contaminated blood scandal. With the Rwanda migration bill still to be passed, the Express says that the first list of illegal migrants to be flown out of the country has already been drawn up. Here's the People. It says that there is a plot by environmental group Just Stop Oil to disrupt airport travel for this year's summer holidays. The Mirror reports that Simon Cowell is trying to heal his much-publicised rift with fellow talent show judges Louis Walsh and Sharon Osbourne. According to my director, the story of the day, The Star brings us an eye-watering account of the moment a hungry seagull met a naturist. No more details necessary. We might have a little bit of fun with that one later. Yeah, shush you too. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages whilst watching us discuss them. Technology, it's remarkable, isn't it? Tonight, as mentioned, we are joined by Yasmin Alabai-Brown and Lucy Beresford. Lovely to see you both. And let's start, actually, with some good news emerging from the United States, although belated good news, I would suggest. The United States House of Representatives starting the process, should be concluded early next week, of getting billions worth of aid and military assistance to Ukraine. Yasmin?
Yeah, and it's fantastic. But it's also alarming, isn't it, that 112 Republicans opposed this. And actually, it was one of their own, Mike Johnson, who's really, really fought a battle of battles to get the right thing to be done. Yeah, it's a brilliant, but it just shows how US politics is in such a crisis. So it's a big breakthrough, I think.
He was rather sluggish, though. I mean, he has actually only recently changed his mind.
And after a visit to Mar-a-Lago and meeting Donald Trump.
And also with Lord Cameron as well. That actually this idea that it has always been a foregone conclusion isn't the case. And absolutely, the Republicans have split between those who voted in favour and those who didn't, whereas the Democrats completely, 100%, voted in favour of this. And of course it is good news, but unfortunately the delay does mean that, particularly in Ukraine, lives have been lost. Yeah. That actually, and I think in a way this is why they wanted to make sure that they did do something for Israel, that they did do something for Taiwan ahead of time, because I think so many people are embarrassed about the fact that they've been so sluggish.
I mean, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tends to be used as an example of the right of the Republican Party, but actually, as you say, Yasmin, 112 Republicans voting against it. There is a significant body of opinion in the party that, you know, not with all likelihood, but has a really good chance of taking the White House. You know, we'll have Donald Trump there at the time. That does not bode well for any kind of mature discussion of security of NATO
Exactly.
As we move forward.
Well, apart from the fact that actually Donald Trump hasn't said anything this week, and actually there has been quite a lot of opportunity. He has got other things on his mind, this is true, but that's never stopped him before. He's got 2 thumbs and he's very good at social media. So I think the idea that he hasn't come out and said that this is a bad deal probably suggests that
something about, I'll keep America safe or something. He has said something. But, and he's a small America guy, you know.
But as we see just at the end of the story there, I mean, Volodymyr Zelensky was warning very, very recently that Ukraine was on the cusp of losing the war if this aid hadn't come. But one wonders the kind of the longer-term effect that the delay has had.
And also, I think there was a very plaintive comment that he made when he saw quite how rapidly America supported Israel.
Indeed.
There was a sense for him that, have you forgotten us? That actually is our conflict old news for you now. And I think that must have tugged at the heartstrings for quite a few people. If you listened to Mick Johnson's conversations and comments and his speech only 2 days ago, they really have understood that the safety of the West is actually at stake, not just the safety of those 3 countries that are being held.
But of course, arming Israel is one of the worst things they're doing. So
no doubt something we will return to discuss again in the 11 o'clock hour. But I do want to move us on to the Sunday Times, their lead story, and I think it is difficult for anyone to objectively disagree with the headline. End this bloody disgrace. There is still no compensation ready for people who have been losing their lives, who have had long-term health issues as a result of something that was preventable in the first place.
Preventable and was known about by the authorities for many, many years, where infected blood that had come from the States, that had been taken from drug addicts, from prisoners, and was then given to many people who had blood disorders, who then died at very young ages. Some people died early in time, but some people died in childhood. And I think what's really interesting is the way in which the nation was captivated over Christmas by the ITV drama about the post office scandal. And it has really started to shine a light on some of these other issues which have been gestating for decades now. I mean, I can even remember the name of the child in my class who had haemophilia and died. You remember these people. These are individuals. And if people like Alan Bates, who is the sub-postmaster who's been campaigning for compensation for the postmasters, if he can get on board with this, somehow you think actually maybe a door will open and compensation will be paid.
The drama did unlock something quite important to the way people woke up to this. And with this Windrush scandal, it's the same thing. But it is an odd front page, I have to say. It's something missing on the Sunday Times and other front pages.
Yes.
Well, we may well get some later editions coming up, but I do want to go to the front of the Sunday Telegraph, and this is the Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley. He has been under fire for some time, now being urged to resign over that incident that took place with an anti-Semitism campaigner. Yasmin, we were talking about this in the break. What's your view?
Well, I think, I don't think it's a resignation issue, but there is certainly a problem at the way, because the laws have been so tightened, partly by Suella Braverman,
who of course is
now is saying that the police officer should go, that protesting, and this shouldn't have happened to him, absolutely should not have happened to him. And for the police to do what they did, and for the crowd, if there were people in the crowd who were shouting anti-Semitism, it shouldn't happen. But this is a problem. I've been on 3 demonstrations so far, Saturday demonstrations, and at least twice the police stopped me. And one occasion was particularly unpleasant when he said, "Are you an Islamicist?" And I said, "No, I'm just here protesting for the rights of Palestinian people not to die." And he said, "Because there are some Islamicists standing behind you." I said, "Well, there could be a murderer standing near me. Does that make me a murderer?" So there is this tension when you're walking now that I never felt before.
Lucy, when it comes to the policing of this, I mean, wearing a yarmulke and being called out by a copper is one thing, but what about, London's Orthodox Jew a Jewish population. I mean, if they were, are they not allowed to go anywhere near central London at any time of it?
But no, that's not happened.
No, but you take
it isn't. That's right. It's not a very far step for you to imagine that that's going to turn it into a no-go area for people who dress in a particular way. But of course, for many of us, for many women, for example, we're very used to being accused of being, it's somehow our fault if a woman wears a short skirt, that somehow she's asking for it. And this is a similar tenor here. So it isn't actually just that Sir Mark Rowley's being called for to resign about this one particular issue. It's the whole narrative of what's been happening since the Hamas atrocities on the 7th of October.
But I have to say this, I do have to say this, a lot of my Jewish friends are on those marches with me, and they have said over and over again, publicly, that really it's not a no-go area for Jewish people. So I want to make sure
there are clearly differences of opinion amongst British Jews. We do not speak with one voice. Let's not forget that. The Observer, their lead story: Labour shifting its tactics to target Conservative voters over the age of 65. I mean, 2 points to make. One is this because they've got everyone else, and two, good luck.
Let's mop up all the rest. Well, I think the main trigger for this is the announcement by Jeremy Hunt that he was minded to do yet another cut to national insurance, which of course is a tax on people who have who are employed, and therefore if you're elderly and you're a pensioner, you're not going to benefit from that particular tax cut. And therefore what Labour is saying, we need to maybe target some policies for those pensioners who are perhaps being become disillusioned with the Tories, because all of the polling suggests that one by one, all of these different constituency groups are turning away from the Conservatives. And again, that overall narrative of who's going to be left, are they just shy Tories, or are they now an extinct species?
I mean, the polling is looking pretty grim.
Yeah, and I think the National Health Service is central to this. The fear that National Health Service is beginning to collapse. And for older people, I'm very old, and I know the fear that you feel, that the safety net may not be there. So good luck to Labour, but,
let's see. Guys, we're going to pause there. More coming up after the break, including this story on the front of the Sunday Express, saying that the migrant flights are ready to take off. Maybe. We'll discuss next.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that?
Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well? I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it had happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me!
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to the press preview. Yasmin and Lucy still with us. And we're going to kick this half off with a story on the front of the Sunday Express. Migrant flights are ready to take off. Are they? I'm not so sure that's an entirely truthful headline.
The headline bears no relation to the text that comes after it, which is basically talking about the fact that some illegal migrants may find out if they're on a list.
A little list. Someone's got a little list.
So the Gilbert and Sullivan song gets brought out again, and it is the first 200 passengers if the plane takes off. So immediately there's a conditional in that. So no, we still don't know if the flights will take off, and nobody knows who's going to be on them.
And do you know, in terms of public opinion, I think this is misguided.
Really?
You know, yeah, I really do. Am I allowed to mention a BBC programme? On Question Time,
briefly, yes.
On Question Time in Buxton, in Buxton, which is a Conservative area, one person in the audience said they supported
the problem is that for a particular demographic, this actually is one of the top 3 issues. It's not the top 3 for most people. That's still the cost of living and the economy in general.
But it's
for those people who do worry about it, and quite a lot of them are pivoting towards reform, which may or may not help them because there might not be a reform candidate standing in their constituency for the general election. But nevertheless, there is still a small constituency that says this is going to be important for me.
As much as anything else, though, isn't it? Because, I mean, Rishi Sunak can't stop pushing for
this
now. He's banged on about it for so long. He simply can't.
It's like a toddler who kind of makes a big fuss about something, notices that nobody is taking any notice, but still has to keep crying because I really want that ice cream.
And what would you recommend to parents in those circumstances?
Go on the naughty step, on the naughty step.
We'll pass that information on to Whitehall. But let's look for our last story, again on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. And this is one involving Penny Mordaunt, who was, and we just looked it up, Defence Secretary for all of 85 days. She's broken ranks and wants us to have a missile defence system just like the Israelis.
I think it's a bid for leadership, isn't it?
She's running. She's
absolutely holding that sword.
I get that. But she's also
take a lot of drones down with that sword.
You certainly could. But she is also asking that in the round for an increase in defence spending, and increasingly I am hearing this from senior Conservatives.
Has there been 5 minutes in this country when the defence lobby hasn't asked for more spending? I cannot remember a time when more money was not asked for, but what you spend it on and how effective it is the thing
that's the key, because I think that's almost what governments need to do first, above education, above health. Actually defending the realm is really important.
And other European countries have increased their defence budgets, noticing that we had a war on our eastern frontier. I don't think it's de trop to be looking at increasing defence spending.
But all I'm saying is, what do you spend the money on? And actually, is a dome shield actually going to be really relevant to a country like the UK?
And it's a different kind of war. And there is NATO. If there was a NATO cooperative venture, OK, let's talk about it. But it is entirely about her wanting to stand for the leadership. That's what it's about, I think.
But again, just in general terms, at the moment, you compare the size of our military to where it was 40, 30, 20 years ago, and look at what it is being asked to do now. Is it beyond the realms of possibility that our chancellors
What is it being asked to do now?
What do you mean?
You said what it's been asked to do.
Defend British shipping around the world with, a handful of ships. Defend British airspace with a handful of airframes.
What's happened over the years is they've cut the personnel, haven't they? Some of the decisions that have been made, and there's been a lot of wastage.
And also they've been looking at very different types of warfare in terms of cyber warfare, for example. But also
that is true.
The way in which the British nation, the British Isles, is a completely different type of country to Israel. Not only is it obviously bigger, but the cities are all spaced out in a way that they're not in Israel. So we wouldn't be subject to that same kind of attack.
Very, very true. I will see both of you in the 11 o'clock hour. Time for us, however, to take a quick look at the weather. And we are at the start of a more settled spell, but it will be cloudy at times with just a little rain possible. There will be a mostly fine, chilly start tomorrow with only limited frost, but it will be cloudy from north-east Scotland all the way down to around Dorset with some drizzly outbreaks in the north. Tomorrow morning looks dry with sunny spells for most, best in the south and northwest, but southern and eastern Scotland and northern England will be cloudy with some patchy, drizzly rain. The southeast can expect the odd shower. It will be very mild in the west, cooler for much of eastern England. So good conditions for the marathon, which I'm not running in. The afternoon will be bringing little change, although any showers in the southeast will fade. Britain looking cloudy on Monday with outbreaks of generally bright rain, perhaps some drizzle spreading to many parts. But the southeast looks mostly dry. Coming up next hour on Sky News at 11 o'clock, a lifeline for Ukraine as the US House of Representatives votes for a $61 billion aid package.